You wake up every morning and the first thing you do is reach for your phone. You scroll endlessly through social media, consume news that makes you anxious, respond to messages that add nothing to your life, and suddenly realize that 2 hours have passed. You get up, go to work at something you secretly suspect is useless to the world, return home exhausted, watch series you'll forget next week, and go to sleep with the feeling that another day has slipped away without real meaning. If this description resonates with your experience, you are not alone. You are experiencing one of the most devastating phenomena of our time: the systematic construction of a world devoid of authentic purpose, a world that is slowly consuming us from within and threatening the very essence of what it means to be human. For the first time in human history, we have created an entire civilization based on perpetual distraction, endless consumption, and the pursuit of instant validation, while fundamental questions about our existence have been pushed to the margins of everyday experience. It is no coincidence that we live amid an epidemic of anxiety, depression, and existential emptiness. We are literally building a world that denies our deepest nature as beings who need meaning to thrive. To understand how we reach this point, we need to look back and recognize that for millennia, human beings found purpose in 3 fundamental pillars: religion, which offered an ordered cosmos and a clear role for each individual within the grand divine plan; community, which provided identity, belonging, and mutual responsibilities; and tradition, which connected each generation to those before and after, creating a sense of continuity and legacy. These 3 pillars were not perfect, often oppressive and limiting, but they offered something our modern era seems incapable of providing: a clear reason to get up in the morning that transcended mere survival or personal gratification. The scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, while liberating humanity from many superstitions and injustices, also began a process of systematic dismantling of these pillars of meaning without offering adequate substitutes. Science taught us that we are an insignificant species in a vast and indifferent universe, that our existence is the product of evolutionary chance, and that there is no inherent purpose or cosmic plan that justifies our presence here. Modern secularism, while eliminating many religious prejudices, also removed the sense that our lives are part of something greater and more permanent than ourselves. What emerged in place of these ancient systems of meaning was something completely new in human experience: a society organized around perpetual economic growth, material consumption, and the maximization of individual experiences. We were convinced that happiness could be bought, that success is measured in bank account numbers and social media likes, and that life's goal is to accumulate as much pleasure and comfort as possible before dying. This philosophy, though never explicitly declared, permeates every aspect of our institutions, from the educational system that prepares us to be productive consumers, to the media that constantly bombards us with messages about what we should buy, how we should look, and what we should desire. The result is a civilization that produces unprecedented material wealth, but leaves its members spiritually starving and existentially lost. We have never had so much access to information, entertainment, and possibilities, but paradoxically, we have never felt so empty and disoriented. We created a system that keeps us constantly busy but rarely engaged in something we consider truly important. We work jobs we often perceive as meaningless, to buy things we don't need, to impress people we don't really like, while fundamental questions about who we are and why we exist remain perpetually unexamined. Digital technology has amplified this crisis of purpose in ways we are only beginning to understand. The algorithms that govern our online experiences were designed to capture and hold our attention, not to help us find meaning or grow as individuals. They feed us content that confirms our biases, that makes us feel superior or outraged, that distracts us from deep or uncomfortable thoughts. The result is that we spend hours each day consuming information that doesn't make us wiser, more compassionate, or more fulfilled, but simply keeps us addicted to the next stimulus. Social media, in particular, has created a perverse form of pseudo-purpose based on constant external validation. We post photos, opinions, and experiences not because they have intrinsic meaning to us, but because we hope to receive approval from an invisible audience. Our self-esteem has become dependent on digital metrics. How many likes, shares, positive comments we receive. This has created a generation of people who live their lives as constant performances, always conscious of how their experiences will appear online, rarely allowing themselves moments of genuine reflection or contemplative silence. Meanwhile, the modern job market has transformed most employment into exercises in Kafkaesque absurdism. Millions of people spend their days in offices producing reports that no one reads, attending meetings about meetings, executing tasks that exist only because the system needs them to exist, not because they add real value to the world. Anthropologist David Graeber called these bullshit jobs positions that the workers themselves recognize as useless, but which are maintained because our economy needs people employed, even in meaningless activities. This lack of purpose in work is particularly devastating because humans have a deep need to feel that their contribution matters, that their effort is building something valuable. When we spend most of our waking hours in activities we perceive as empty, this corrodes our sense of dignity and self-worth. It's no surprise that so many people report feeling like they're wasting their lives, as if they're trapped in an endless routine that leads nowhere. Consumerism offers a temporary solution to this feeling of emptiness, but it's a solution that only worsens the problem in the long term. We buy things to feel better, to express our identity, to appear successful in others' eyes. But the satisfaction we get from purchases is always temporary, always followed by the need for the next product, the next experience, the next upgrade. We created an economy based on making people feel dissatisfied with what they have, perpetually inadequate, constantly needing more to be happy or complete. This infinite pursuit of more not only leaves us spiritually empty, but is also literally destroying the planet we inhabit. An economy of perpetual growth on a finite planet is mathematically impossible, but we continue pretending we can indefinitely expand our resource consumption without facing catastrophic consequences. Climate change, mass species extinction, ocean pollution are all manifestations of this purposeless pursuit of more, always more. The irony is that the more we try to find happiness through consumption and distraction, the emptier we become. Psychological studies consistently show that people who focus on materialistic values tend to be less happy, more anxious, and less satisfied with their lives than those who prioritize relationships, personal growth, and contribution to something greater than themselves. We know this intellectually, but our society continues to be structured to encourage exactly the behaviors we know make us miserable. One of the most disturbing manifestations of this crisis of purpose is what psychologists call functional nihilism. Many people, especially young ones, have developed a life philosophy that essentially says, nothing really matters, so I'll just try to have as much fun as possible and avoid thinking about the future. This nihilism is not the result of deep philosophical contemplation, but a defensive reaction to a world that seems to offer no compelling reasons to care about anything. When we ask people why they do what they do, why they choose certain careers, relationships, or lifestyles, the answers often reveal a frightening absence of deep reflection. It's what's expected. It's what everyone does. I need to pay the bills. That's just how things are, have become the default justifications for fundamental life choices. We've lost the ability to ask basic questions about whether the way we live actually serves us, whether our values are consciously chosen or passively absorbed from the surrounding culture. This existential passivity makes people vulnerable to manipulation by forces that have an interest in keeping them distracted and conformist. Populist politicians thrive in societies where people feel purposeless, offering simple enemies to blame and simplistic solutions to complex problems. Corporations benefit from consumers seeking to fill existential voids with products. Extremists of all stripes find fertile ground among those who feel lost and desperate for some cause to give meaning to their lives. The lack of purpose is also related to the alarming decline in mental health, especially among young people. Rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide have increased dramatically in recent decades, precisely during the period when material life has improved for most people in the developed world. This suggests that it's not the lack of physical comfort that's making us suffer, but the lack of spiritual and existential meaning. Young people, in particular, are growing up in a world that offers them infinite possibilities for career and lifestyle, but little guidance on how to choose among them in ways that lead to a satisfying life. They are constantly bombarded with messages about following their dreams and doing what makes them happy, but rarely receive practical tools for discovering what this means or how to balance personal desires. With responsibilities to others and to the future, modern education, unfortunately, contributes to this problem by focusing almost exclusively on developing technical skills and preparing for the job market, completely neglecting fundamental questions about how to live a good and meaningful life. Students spend years learning facts and procedures, but are rarely encouraged to reflect on their values, purposes, or what kind of person they want to become. They graduate with degrees, but without a philosophy of life to guide them through the difficult choices they will face. Family and community which historically provided support structures and value systems, have also been weakened by modernity. Many people live isolated, far from family and neighbors, depending primarily on superficial and temporary relationships for emotional support. Geographic mobility, while offering opportunities, also uproots people from the community contexts that traditionally gave meaning to their lives. At the same time, we witness the emergence of poor substitutes for authentic purpose. Celebrity culture offers figures to admire and imitate, but these figures often represent the very superficial values that contribute to the crisis of meaning. Online activism allows people to feel they're making a difference in the world just by sharing posts or signing petitions, without engaging in the difficult and sustained work necessary for real change. Workaholism disguises itself as purpose when people define themselves entirely through their careers, often at the expense of health, relationships, and well-being. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is that the lack of purpose is not just a personal problem, but a threat to the stability and progress of civilization as a whole. Societies composed of individuals without clear direction or commitment to shared values become vulnerable to extreme polarization, social conflict, and institutional collapse. When people don't believe their actions matter or that the future is worth protecting, they stop making the sacrifices necessary to keep a complex society functioning. We see this happening around us. Reluctance to address climate change because it requires short-term sacrifices for long-term benefits. Extreme political polarization because people without their own purpose find identity in tribal hostility. Decline in civic participation because individuals focused only on personal gratification don't see value in contributing to the common good. I need to stop for a moment and ask you directly, which aspect of this lack of purpose in our society most resonates with your own experience? Do you recognize yourself in this description of lives lived on autopilot, constantly seeking distractions to avoid confronting fundamental questions about meaning and direction? I know we often avoid thinking deeply about these issues because it can be uncomfortable to acknowledge how lost we might be, but your honest reflection is valuable not just for you, but for all of us navigating this complex territory. Share in the comments, I feel lack of purpose when. Your experience can help others realize they're not alone in this search for meaning in a world that often seems designed to distract us from it. But recognizing the problem is just the first step. The crucial question is, how can we begin to rebuild meaning and purpose in our lives and in our society? The answer is not in returning to old forms of social organization that no longer serve our current needs, but in consciously creating new forms of meaning that are adequate to the realities of the modern world. First, we need to develop what we might call existential literacy, the ability to consciously examine our values, question our assumptions, and make deliberate choices about how we want to live. This means setting aside regular time for deep reflection, away from the constant distractions of digital life. It means asking difficult questions. What do I really value? What kind of person do I want to be? How can I contribute to something greater than myself? What legacy do I want to leave? Second, we need to reconnect with what psychologists call intrinsic values, those that come from within and contribute to our genuine well-being, as opposed to extrinsic values that are imposed by society and often leave us empty. Deep relationships, personal growth, creativity, contribution to community, connection with nature are examples of intrinsic values that consistently lead to satisfaction and meaning. Third, we need to reimagine work in ways that allow more space for activities we consider meaningful. This might mean structural changes like shorter work weeks, universal basic income, or new models of business organization that prioritize purpose beyond profit. On a personal level, it means seeking ways to align our work with our values, or finding ways to contribute meaningfully to the world through activities outside traditional employment. Fourth, we need to rebuild real communities, not just virtual ones. Humans are social animals who find meaning through deep connections and mutual responsibilities. This might mean investing in local relationships, participating in civic organizations, creating or joining groups based on shared interests or common values. Technology can facilitate these connections, but it cannot replace them. Fifth, we need to develop a new relationship with time and the concept of progress. Modern culture teaches us to value speed, efficiency, and constant growth, but a meaningful life often requires slowness, contemplation, and appreciation of what we already have. We need to learn to value depth over breadth, quality over quantity, being over having. Sixth, we need to confront our mortality in a constructive way. One of the reasons so many people feel purposeless is that they live as if they were immortal, indefinitely postponing questions about what really matters. Recognizing our finitude can be liberating, helping us prioritize what is truly important and live with greater intention and appropriate urgency. Seventh, we need to find ways to contribute to causes that transcend our individual existence. This might be through conscious parenting, environmental work, social justice, advancing knowledge, artistic creation, or any activity that leaves the world a little better than we found it. The feeling of building something lasting is fundamental to human well-being. Eighth, we need to develop contemplative practices that help us navigate the internal complexity of human existence. This might include meditation, prayer, reflective writing, therapy, philosophy, or any practice that promotes self-knowledge and wisdom. In a world that constantly bombards us with external stimuli, creating spaces for internal reflection becomes even more crucial. Ninth, we need to educate future generations not just to be economically productive, but to be reflective and ethical human beings. This means including philosophy, ethics, psychology, and emotional education in basic curricula. It means teaching young people to ask deep questions about life and giving them tools to find their own answers. 10th, we need to create cultural narratives that celebrate depth, contemplation, and contribution instead of just material success and superficial fame. This means supporting art, literature, journalism, and entertainment that explore deep existential themes and model healthy ways of living. It means resisting the commercialization of all aspects of human experience. The transformation I'm describing is not just individual, but cultural and structural. It requires us to question fundamental assumptions about how our society is organized and to have the courage to experiment with new ways of living together. This doesn't mean abandoning all the benefits of modernity, but rather integrating the technological and material advances we've achieved with ancestral wisdom about what makes life worth living. The challenge is immense because we are essentially trying to change the direction of a very large ship in motion. The forces that promote consumerism, distraction, and superficiality are powerful and well-funded. They benefit from keeping us divided, distracted, and focused on short-term satisfaction. Resisting these forces requires discipline, community, and a clear vision of the kind of life and society we want to create. But there are reasons for optimism. More and more people are realizing that something is fundamentally wrong with the way we are living. Movements toward simpler lifestyles, meaningful work, community connections, and contemplative practices are growing. Young people especially are questioning the materialistic values of previous generations and seeking alternative ways to define success and happiness. Technology, while part of the problem, can also be part of the solution if used consciously. Digital tools can facilitate meaningful connections, democratize access to education and information, and enable innovative forms of social and economic organization. The key is developing a more intentional and selective relationship with technology, using it to serve our deeper values instead of allowing it to use us. The crisis of purpose we face is not merely a social or psychological problem, but an evolutionary crisis. We have reached a point in our history where the structures and instincts that brought us here are no longer adequate for the challenges we face. We need to evolve consciously, develop new capacities for wisdom, compassion, and cooperation that allow us to create a world that serves not just our survival, but the flourishing of all beings. This evolution will not happen automatically. It requires conscious effort from millions of individuals who choose to live more intentionally and work together to create systematic change. Each person who decides to deeply examine their life, question dominant cultural values, and seek more meaningful ways of existing contributes to this greater transformation. Human history can be seen as a series of awakenings. The awakening of consciousness, the awakening of language, the awakening of agriculture, the awakening of science. Now we face the need for another awakening. The awakening to conscious purpose, the ability to create meaning intentionally in a universe that doesn't offer us ready-made answers. This awakening is not only possible but necessary for our long-term survival as a species. The same capacities that allowed us to create incredible technologies and complex societies can allow us to create lives rich in meaning and purpose. But this requires that we stop living on autopilot and begin consciously piloting our individual and collective existences. The current moment, however challenging, also represents a unique opportunity in human history. For the first time, we have enough knowledge about psychology, society, and human nature to consciously create cultures that promote genuine flourishing. We have technologies that can facilitate connection and collaboration on previously impossible scales. We have sufficient material resources to ensure everyone's basic needs are met, freeing energy for higher pursuits. What's lacking are not tools or resources, but collective will to use these gifts to create something better than the consumerist and purposeless civilization we inherited. This will must begin with each individual who decides their life can and should mean more than a sequence of distractions between birth and death. If these reflections have touched on something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to this channel, you'll connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the existential challenges of our time. Each week, we gather here to explore together the big questions that define our era and to seek not just understanding, but also wiser ways to live amid the transformations we're witnessing. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this continuous journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. The choice lies before us. We can continue building a world that leaves us empty and desperate, or we can begin consciously working to create something that honors our deepest humanity. The future is not something that happens to us, but something we create through our daily choices, small and large. And each choice we make toward greater consciousness, connection, and purpose is a vote for the kind of world we want to bequeath to future generations.
The democratic conversation is breaking down. And every country has its own explanation. Like you talk to Americans, what's happening there between Democrats and Republicans? Why can't they agree on even the most basic facts? And they give you all these explanations about the unique conditions of American history and society. But you see the same thing in Brazil. You see the same thing in France, in the Philippines. So it can't be the unique conditions of this or that country. It's the underlying technological revolution.
The thing is that not in a dictatorship, in a democracy, newspapers and other news outlets are liable for their decisions. Like if the editor of the New York Times decides to publish some conspiracy theory or fake news at the front page of the New York Times, he cannot hide or she cannot hide behind the argument, but free speech, there are some people who believe it's true, so I put it on the front page of the New York Times. No, your job as editor is not just to put something random there or something that would please people. Your job is to fact check and to take responsibility for these decisions and to make sure that if you publish something on the front page of the New York Times, you better be sure that this is accurate and this is responsible. And if you don't know how to do it, then you're in the wrong job.
Another story is about Tiberius, the Roman Emperor Tiberius. He was afraid to be assassinated, like all emperors. Unfortunately for him, the commander of his bodyguard, Sejanus, was an extremely ambitious person also. Sejanus convinced Tiberius to move to live on the small island of Capri, telling Tiberius that there he will be safer, because it would be easier to protect him against assassins and spies and so forth. And Tiberius moved to live in Capri. But then Sejanus controlled all the information that reached the emperor. It was very easy for him. But nobody could get to Capri. No letter could reach the emperor unless it passed through the hands of the bodyguards. And Sejanus became the real ruler of the Roman Empire because he controlled all the information reaching Tiberius. And if somebody tried to make a move against him, he could always tell Tiberius that this person was conspiring against him or was a threat and should be eliminated. And to some extent, this is true of all of us. All of us can find ourselves isolated on an island, maybe a digital island, and whoever controls the information that reaches our ears and eyes control us.